Good afternoon. It's Friday, June 25th, 2021 at almost 3 o'clock in the afternoon. I don't know if this video is going to be posted or uploaded this evening. I've got a lot of things to do this evening. But if not, I will try to get it done first thing in the morning. Take a few minutes and speak about so-called green energy. Green energy is, well, one, it's not green, but it's destructive to nature. Green energy, as it's being sold by politicians and the money elite, these people from big cities, is anti-nature. There is a word called presentism. And what it means is you take your current mindset of today and you project it back in time and say, what I have available to me, what I have in my life, the conditions I live with now, whether that's nature or being up in the mountains, what have you, that is exactly how our ancestors lived. And that is using a present mindset extrapolated onto our pagan ancestors. That is not correct. It's anything but correct. There's a few books that I'm going to mention to help rectify this presentism. My wife and I had the privilege of growing up in the mountains, and we both grew up in the Adirondack Mountains of upstate New York. And she had the blessing of growing up in a place called Elk Lake, where the Elk Lake Lodge is up in the Adirondacks. Absolutely stunningly beautiful. That's part of her blood memory now. And the last time we were up there and visited, I read through their book that they keep in their front lobby area, and I was struck by a sentence in there that said that the lodge is named Elk Lake Lodge, but they don't understand why, because there are no elk in the Adirondack Mountains. And that is true. There are no longer any elk in the Adirondack Mountains. That's a point I'm going to return to. Let's put that on the back burner for a minute. There is an 1863 book called The Pioneer History of the Champlain Valley. And in that book, it is documented that in the Crown Point area, which is on what's now called Lake Champlain, in 1775, that is the year the American Revolution started, that the forest around that area was already what they called a secondary forest. In other words, the original forest that was there was cut down, and the secondary forest, which is much smaller trees, had taken its place in that area. And that this Crown Point area was a thriving community in 1775. So other sources, old sources like that, of the Adirondack Mountains, state that there is evidence of a primeval forest that went all the way up into Canada that had trees that were 12 to 20 feet in diameter. 12 to 20 feet in diameter is the equivalent of what we know to be the redwood forests out west, in the Northwest. So this mountain range, these mountain ranges that even my wife and I grew up in, would have been dwarfed by the ancient forests that our ancestors would have been around. A little bit further in the book, he talks about salmon in the Lake Champlain. Now, he said there was so much salmon there that you could throw a spear into the water and catch salmon. That they would pull out hundreds of pounds, thousands of pounds per day of salmon from Lake Champlain. Now, this is important because in the saga, Leif Erikson states that there is a body of water. Now remember, Leif Erikson was in North America 500 years before Christopher Columbus ever set sail. But he said there's a body of water with more salmon that he's ever seen in his life. Now, this coming from a Viking who left a place that had Lax Riverdale as a name of one of their areas. Lax Riverdale means lox, salmon, river, dale. So they named this place after the salmon, amount of salmon in the river. And then Leif Erikson says he's found a body of water that is with more salmon than he's ever seen in his life. Now, why is this important? Because, for one, that primeval forest has never returned to those Adirondack Mountains. And for two, the salmon, and I'll explain why I think Leif Erikson was speaking about Lake Champlain in just a moment. The salmon still have not recovered from that depletion, from that overfishing, over-harvesting. And it is very tricky to get the salmon to recover into that lake because they have to duplicate the spawning and how long they're in the fresh water before they return to the Atlantic, and it's a process. And so there's a lot of difficulty in getting the salmon to return in the way that they used to be in that lake. Now, this is why Lake Champlain is the lake that, another reason why, that Leif Erikson was speaking about. Because the Viking Age was at the end of an ice age. And so the ice melts were causing the rivers to be, well, it's documented as about 16 feet deeper on the upper range, 16 feet deeper. And this allowed for ships to travel inland farther. So if you take what's now called the St. Lawrence Seaway and you sail that west, you'll come to another river that runs pretty much north and south, which is called the Richelieu River. That Richelieu River goes right into Lake Champlain. And this would allow Leif Erikson to sail into Vinland, Markland, and Helluland, which are totally mistranslated and mislabeled from what they're said to be. That's for another time. So there is a loss of salmon, a destruction of nature with that salmon and with that forest. But that wasn't done by solar panels and windmills. No, that was done by Abrahamic people coming into an area and decimating it. It happened everywhere that these Abrahamic cults of Judaism, Christianity, and Islam went. They destroyed nature. And it's just documented in Europe and as well as in the Americas. The other book is an 1884 book, and it's The Mammals of the Adirondack Region, northeastern New York. And this is going to go back to Elk Lake, where my wife grew up. In that book, 1884, they come right out and they say elk were common in the Adirondacks. Elk were common in the Adirondacks. And they give two previous people, they quote them, Well, I'll just name two of them. They give more than two, but I'll just quote these two. One was 1834 out in Allegheny County, which is western New York, because they say that the elk also inhabited northwestern Pennsylvania, all the way up through the state and into the Adirondacks. And they quoted this person that he shot and killed an elk, a stag. And others have found the antlers in the woods, and an 1836 account is on the Racket on the north branch of the Saranac, where a person shot at a stag, an elk, and apparently missed. It just says he shot at it, whereas the other one said he killed it. So they document in this book that it won't be long before the elk is extirpated from the Adirondacks. Why was Elk Lake named Elk Lake? Well, because there were elk in the Adirondacks in New York State. There aren't anymore. They've been extirpated. Now, these are not moose. It says, at the time of the writing of the book, that moose are still numerous in Essex County, Hamilton County, Herkimer County, Franklin County, Lewis County, Warren County. So now the moose are just beginning to return, but they're being brought in. They're not there by numbers. Now this is 140 years later, thereabouts, and salmon have not recovered, the moose have not recovered, elk are non-existent in the Adirondacks, and people, to the point where people don't even know that they were ever once there. And wolves in the Adirondacks. The book documents that they were hunting in packs in the Adirondack Mountains. You will be lucky to see one wolf here and there. You would be lucky to. Now, this second book, this 1884 book, The Mammals of the Adirondack region of northeastern New York, we put that quote, we quoted them in our book, Northern Paganism, our poems book. The second series, it's in the table of contents, poem 4. And we sourced the book, the author, the date it was written, and we gave the quotes. The final book that I'm going to reference is, I'm going back to The Secret Life of Plants. There is a chapter in there that says, and they're talking about old televisions, the old cathode ray tubes in the television sets. And they're saying how it gives off an abundance of radiation that causes problems in human behavior and causes cancer. And now if you do an internet search and you ask if your cell phone causes cancer, or if your flat screen TV causes cancer, or your computer screen causes cancer, they're going to say it gives off a certain amount of radiation, but there is no known link to anything cancerous. Okay, that's what they're saying. And they say there's no studies that prove it has any link to cancer, blah, blah, blah. Fluorescent light bulbs in this book, The Secret Life of Plants, also give off a radiation that creates cancer and bad behavior, they say. So we have politicians that are pushing a green energy where they want to destroy nature. Now remember, once they destroy the nature, I'm going to give an example. Right in the state of Florida, houses are being built at an astronomical rate, and they're clear-cutting swaths of land to build in these housing complex gated communities by the thousands, and animals are being displaced. And so what happens to those animals? Well, here's what happens. When Rick Scott was governor, bear, black bear, the American black bear, was wandering into these suburban areas, people's yards, and digging through their trash, and people were approaching them and they felt scared of the bears. City slickers feeling scared of the bears. Where have I heard that before, for crying out loud? And so what did then Governor Scott do? He issued a special hunting period to extirpate bears from those communities. So you see, it's deleterious to nature. So when they put up these solar panels and they put up these windmills and they clear-cut nature, not only do they destroy the ecosystem of a nature that will never return to the state that it was before. Look at the primeval forest of the Adirondack Mountains. Look at the elk. Look at the moose. Look at the wolves. Not only do they destroy that ecosystem, they destroy the animal kingdom that inhabits it, because those bears are not walking through suburbia. They're walking through their home territory, where they grew up, where they fed, where they denned. Northern pagans are children of the light. And if we don't speak up on behalf of nature, what we grow up experiencing, which is vastly reduced from what our ancestors experienced, will not be experienced by our grandchildren. They paved paradise and they put up a parking lot. So if these city slicking politicians want to put up solar panels and windmills, why not Times Square? They got bad conduct there. Look at all the fluorescent lights and TV screens just in Times Square. Other big cities across the world, around the world, but just in America. You know what? Take down some of them big television sets and all that fluorescent lighting or LEDs or whatever they have there now, and put up your solar panels. That's where you want them. Leave nature alone, because nature doesn't recover like we want to believe it will. Anyways, that's where I'm going to end this video. May Mother Goddess Freya bless you with her freedom and increase. Tills nästa gång. Good hälsa.
Mm-hmm.